In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the heat exchanger in your BMW with the B58 engine. My car is a 440i, but this will also work for the 340i, 240i, 5 and 7 series, pretty much all the models that have the B58 engine. The heat exchanger that I got is from CSF. There are also offerings from Wagner, CTS, and Berger Motorsports, potentially others in the future. These options only fit the 1, 2, 3, and 4 series. So again, this is a mod where the cars with the bigger engine bays, like the 5 and 7 series and the X models, don't have options from the aftermarket companies yet, but hopefully in the future they do. But if you're just replacing your heat exchanger because you hit a rock and it's leaking or something like that, this should be the same process. Like usual, the actual process concept is pretty simple. We're going to remove the fan, remove all the brackets on top, and then pull the radiators out from this side. I know a lot of people like to pull off the front bumper and take all these crash bars and everything off and show, cool pictures of the heat exchanger hanging out. But I'm by myself. I don't want to unplug all the sensors and everything and worry about realigning the bumper. I know it's not the end of the world, but I feel like this process is pretty easy, and it's also what's in the actual BMW manual. So I'll show a little bit of a different process than what most people do. So we're going to be unplugging a lot of electrical connectors. That means you start off by going to the trunk, disconnect the negative terminal of your battery. Just do it so you don't have to think about it or worry about potentially shorting something out when you plug it back in. And then we're going to come back into the engine bay. You have your intake. Mine is aftermarket, but the process is pretty much the same as the stock one. You're going to unplug the math, pull out this clip, pop it up. There we go. Squeeze it and pull it out. And then I'm going to undo these hose clamps, undo all these clips around the stock box, and then we're going to pull that part out. And here we have the upper air box removed. One thing in the last video, I showed how to install the Dynon intake, and I had somebody in the comments talking about the design. So I realized I never showed the actual filter, so this is what it is. It's not just a flat paper filter like stock, it's a big cone filter. You can see how much bigger the box is, and the filter is taking up all the space in the box. That they basically took up all the real estate they had available. And there's even additional filter element at the top for more airflow. So yeah, that's why you're able to decrease spool time with Dynon intakes and other ones like it. Anyway, so next we're going to remove the lower air box. It's held down by 3 grommets, so you just need to use a lot of force and pull it straight up. You can see there's 1, 2, and then there's a grommet that's actually on this pin as well. So you're pulling up at those 3 points to pop it out of those rubber grommets. Put it down. And then we're going to come down here and remove the upper intake pipe. I'm going to just loosen that hose clamp and pull it off. All right, now that you have the intake out of the way, we can remove the fan. We need to pop this out for the hood release. And then down here, there is a harness for the fan. You just squeeze both sides and pull straight up. And then this harness is kind of held in by a clamp right here. And it's kind of hard to see, but it's just like unhooking a zip tie. You get this in here, and then you can just push the actual zip tie portion out of the way. So finagle that out. There we go. And now you can actually unhook the entire harness and get it out of the way. And then we just have 1 screw to remove right here in the top corner. It's a T25. So take that off. So now we have the screw removed from the fan, and all you have is this bracket down here at the bottom. You're basically going to take the fan and slide it out of this bracket that it's sitting in. On this side, it's a lot trickier. You can kind of see where the fan is clipped in, there's like a retaining feature on top. So you kind of have to push it down like that with a long screwdriver or something, and then slide it out. And there's the fan removed, just so you can see it a little better. This is what your issue is. So sliding it back in is nice because it just clips into place, but you kind of need to push this top tab down so that you actually have room to slide it out. Next, you're going to remove this cover that stretches across the front end of the car. Both sides are symmetrical, so I'm pretty much going to focus on one side when explaining this, but you remove these 6 screws across the front edge. Then you're going to remove these 2 screws for the headlight bracket. Get this bracket off. These 2 up here and here hold the latch for the hood, so take those off. Take the opposite 2 off, and then these top 2 come off as well. These rounder ones right here are T30s. These ones on the top are T40s, and then these big mamma jammas up on the front are T45s. Now we've got all the bolts loosened. Just be careful. A lot of them have thread locker on them just to hold it and make it more secure. So they're very hard to remove. So be careful when you're removing them. Don't like strip anything out. I ended up using like a screwdriver just to give it a little more torque and keep everything square. Then to remove these headlight brackets, it's kind of on a hinge, so you rotate it up and slide it out. Same on this side. Rotate it up, and then it comes out. Then you're going to come down and remove these covers. There's one on both sides. You pop this cover off, and then there's a little tab right here that has to be squeezed in on both sides to actually slide it out. And you can see there's like a little slot you can stick a small screwdriver in. So squeeze it on both sides and then put a screwdriver in and kind of pop it off, and then you'll see the whole thing come out. All right, so now we've got all the screws removed. The little retaining clips are slid out. You're gonna need to take this latch on both sides and kind of slide it out of the way. And then you're ready to actually pull this whole thing off. There we go. Got it out. And then you have another pair of screws, one here and one over here. You need to undo those. And then this is going to be able to come straight up. So here we have everything removed, ready to take the heat exchanger out. What we're going to do now is jack up the car and drain all the coolant from the bottom. Alright, so now we've jacked up the car. I jacked it up just enough so my bucket can fit underneath. This is actually as low as my jack stands go, so I would love to have it lower, but just make sure you're not jacking it up sky high because you're going to be draining the coolant and it's just going to make more of a mess. And then you get under the car, and this trim panel is right underneath your heat exchanger, so you're going to remove all these bolts all the way around the perimeter to get this trim panel off, and then you'll be ready to drain the coolant. Now we're back on top of the car, got all your trim removed, your under panels removed, you've got your bucket set up, and now you're ready to drain the coolant. Remember, you've got 2 different cooling systems, right? This radiator is for your engine cooling system. This heat exchanger is for your intercooler circuit, and this is the one we're replacing. So what you want to do is remove the hose from the lowest point on the radiator to drain as much coolant as possible. So on your engine radiator, that hose is all the way down there in the bottom corner. And then for your intercooler heat exchanger, it is down here, this bottom hose, not this top one, the one underneath it, behind it, that's a little bit smaller. That's the one that you're going to pull to drain it. Now, I was thinking about trying to just remove this heat exchanger to save some coolant, because you're going to have to refill both systems. You're going to have to rebleed both systems. It's a very tight fit, so I'll probably try to see if I can make it work. But the actual BMW manual says to remove the engine radiator and then the heat exchanger. So we'll see how much luck I have in doing that. Also, I just wanted to quickly show you how you actually remove the coolant line. So everyone has this clip, and all you're going to do is use a pick or a screwdriver, pop it up like that, and then when it's at this point, you can just pull the line off and the coolant will drain out. Then once you pop it back on, you'll take the clip and push it back down into place, and that'll hold it in. So while it's draining, you can hear it coming out right now. I wanted to say a few things. First of all, you can definitely do the draining portion first so that you're not sitting here just waiting for the coolant to drain out. I like to do it last because I've had issues working on cars in the past, and I know partway through the process you might realize you don't have a tool or you break something, got to make a run to the hardware store. So this way at least you're doing it as the very last thing, and you're not risking having to refill the system and make a run or, you know, have your car down. So that's why I waited until the end. But if you have everything set up, feel free to do it earlier in the process so that it'll be done by the time you're ready to refill it. Also, you saw while it was draining, don't forget to remove your cooling cap for the system that you're actually draining. That'll let the air actually flow all the way through, and you should be good to go. So I'll be refilling it with coolants again. I'm actually going to be using a different dilution of coolant and water. It's supposed to be 50-50, but because it's a low temp circuit and I don't drive the car where it's like really freezing temps, I'm going to dilute it. I haven't really decided yet, probably either 30% or 40% coolant instead of 50% coolant. The water in your coolant is actually what does all of the heat transfer, and the coolant is called antifreeze because all it does is prevent the water from freezing in cold temps. So use your best judgment for that. There's a lot of people that run more water in the summer and then switch it out to more coolant in the winter just to protect your cooling system. But just to maximize the efficiency of the CSF heat exchanger, I'm going to dilute it a little bit so that I have more water and it will improve the cooling. Sounds like we're done. Let's get ready to pull these radiators out. So it looks like I should actually be able to make this work without removing the engine radiator. What I did was just kind of push it out of the way on this side, like the tab likes to get hung up on the wiring and stuff. So work it around the wiring, get it back as much as possible. On this side, you can't get it as far because of the tab down there butting up to the oil cooler, but push it out of the way. And then down here, there's a little pair of tabs that are clipping in the heat exchanger. So you want to squeeze those. That's the bottom one, and then the top one you push it down, and then you can actually unclip the radiator from the shroud. And then do that. Don't forget to unclip not this top hose, but this hose underneath is also going to the heat exchanger, so take that one off, and then you'll be able to pull the whole thing out from the top. If you don't want to do all that, you can drain the engine coolant system, pull that radiator out. There will be plenty more room to work. Just for me, this is easier, so this is the route I'm going. So now we're ready to reinstall it. You'll come back to the car, slide it down, clip it onto the shroud brackets. These actually clip into those tabs on the side. So you'll slide it down, clip it in, put the hoses back on, put your radiator back in place. Don't worry about that. That's coolant that drained out when I was pulling out the heat exchanger. Put the hoses back on, start reassembling everything, and then get ready to bleed the system. Here we have everything reinstalled. We have the heat exchanger and the engine radiator back in there. I'm working on screwing them back in. I was just kind of holding it in place to locate everything. To actually put the hoses back on, this clip, push it back down, and then pop the hose back on and it'll clip into place. So got that hose reinstalled, the other blower hose down there reinstalled. The other thing, just make sure that they're fully seated. This should not be able to move much from the bottom, and there's actually like a pocket down there. So what I did, just to make sure it was installed, I removed this panel, there's like one screw over here and one screw on that end, and this panel swings down, and then you can look underneath the shroud. There's like a little pocket where the engine radiator sits and a little pocket where the heat exchanger sits. So just make sure they're in there tight. These shouldn't be floating around. Alright, so I'm topping off the system now. This is how much coolant came out, so a little less than half a gallon. So what I'm doing is adding about 3/4 of a gallon of distilled water, and then the rest will be straight coolant. CSF estimates that the capacity is increased by about 60%, and the stock system holds a gallon of 50-50 mix, so I'm diluting it by adding more water than coolant just to make up for what's still in the system and top it off fully. Alright, so now we're back in the car. I'm going to show you how to bleed the cooling system. There are two different methods to do this. If you bring your car to the dealership, they'll do the vacuum fill method where they hook it up to their air system, and they'll pressurize your cooling system so that it pushes all the coolant into all the cavities and sucks out the air and basically forces the air out of the system. The one that I'm going to do is the sequence that BMW set up in pretty much all of their cars that have electric water pumps. You actually have two different options when you do this. There's one for the low temp circuit and one for the high temp circuit. So for the low temp circuit, after you replace your heat exchanger, you're going to turn on the car, turn on your headlights, turn on your hazards, and then you're going to turn your heat to the max temp and the lowest actual fan speed. And once you do all of that, you're going to hold the gas pedal, and you have to hold it, it says, for about 15 seconds, but just hold it until you hear the water pump turn on. It's probably going to come now. There you go. So you can hear it running. And it'll cycle a couple times. You can actually hear the bubbles coming out. And if it seems like it's running but you don't hear bubbles or it's not moving, just squeeze this hose. This is the hose coming off of the water pump, and it'll help push some air out of the system and create a little bit of a vacuum, and then the pump will just backfill it. So just let it run. It'll go a couple times. It'll cycle every like 15 seconds like you hear now for maybe the first 3 minutes or so, and then it'll start cycling over longer periods. It'll cycle every like 3 minutes. So you'll hear it slow down the frequency, but it'll still keep going. Let it run out fully until it doesn't go for maybe like 5 minutes. I think the full process takes about 15 minutes. And it'll just keep running, pumping fluid through the system, and you'll be good. Now it looks like I need to top it off. So I'll get my water. Add some water to it. Get it everywhere, and then let it continue running. And that's how you do it. This is actually my third time doing it now. So this full process has taken me about 30 to 45 minutes. Just keep bleeding it until you don't hear or see any more bubbles coming out. Now I'm squeezing the hose and you can see some more bubbles coming out. So just keep running it until there are no more bubbles. And that's how you know that it's filled up. Or, you know, in my case, like I said, a half gallon of coolant came out. So if you get a little more than a gallon put back in with the CSF heat exchanger, you know that you filled it back up. So that's the process. It's pretty simple. Just make sure as you drive it over the next couple days, you keep an eye on your coolant levels. But running that manual process to turn on the electric pumps should bleed it out, it'll be doing the exact same thing that would happen if you were driving the car and the water pumps turned on their own. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below.